All right. So this is Andrew Dombek. This is the Get Back with Dombek Podcast. And today we have the head coach or manager, I guess they say in the UK, of the Washington Spirit, Richie Burke. How are you doing today?
Hey, Andrew. How you doing, mate?
I'm good, man. Before we get started on asking you about your background and stuff like that, did you hear who just purchased or made a bid or has become part owner of the Washington Spirit?
Are you talking about Ovechkin?
Ovechkin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's been in the works for a while, that one.
Yeah. I didn't think you liked hockey.
I'm not a big hockey fan, but I'm a big Ovechkin fan. Especially since he's now one of our investors.
I heard a story on one of the podcasts. I went back and listened to a bunch of the podcasts that either you did or that you were on, and they talked about, I guess, when you were here in Washington, when you're playing, your playing days, and you went to the basement of a bar with your mates from the team, and there's a bunch of hockey players, and there was a little dust up down there.
A brawl broke out, yeah, down in a bar in K Street. We were there for a PR event, and there was a basketball player, two soccer players for the Diplomats, and some hockey players. The fight broke out, and those hockey players can look after themselves. That's for sure.
Definitely. My nephew plays minor league hockey, and he definitely can. He knows how to throw down. He throws down quite often.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you more questions about hockey later, believe it or not. But why don't you give us a little bit of background about your upbringing and how you got to where you are today?
Well, clearly I'm not an American. I'm from Liverpool, England, and I played football all my life growing up. I was very lucky to play on some prestigious teams in the city. I played for Liverpool schoolboys, played for England schoolboys, played for England under-19s, signed for Everton, signed for Liverpool first, and I was released by Liverpool and I signed for Everton. A typical professional career that bounces you around. Came to America, played in Australia, played back in England a couple of times, played indoor. So, spent a career chasing contracts and playing football around the world. And then I settled here in Washington, D.C. And I started coaching. As soon as I finished playing, another teammate of mine, we formed a company together that was coaching, clinics, camps, stuff like that. And I stayed connected to the area. But I've been back and forth quite a bit. I was manager in Scotland with Livingston Football Club in the Scottish Premier League. So it's been an interesting journey. But football's been at the core of it.
Tell me about what in your upbringing may have influenced your management style.
Oh, the most influential person in my life was my father, who was a boxer. He was not a soccer player. He was a welterweight champion of Great Britain, and he was combined services boxing champion. He was pretty direct and pretty abrupt, and he was a major influence on me and my personality, my nature. He never really had a good word to say about me. He always pushed me to be better at everything. So even if I was the best player on the field, he would never say, "Great job, you played well." He would say, "How did you miss that header on the far post? And how did you give that ball away there? And how did you do that there?" So I spent a career, especially in the early parts, sort of angry growing up, trying to prove to him that I'm the best player he's ever seen. And not until much later on when he passed away, I was cleaning out the attic in his house. And my mother had said, there's some stuff upstairs in the attic, can you go get it? So I climbed into the attic, and lo and behold, he's got a box filled with a lot of the memorabilia from when I played. And then it was a game, I remember it clear as a day, because I kept my England cap from this game. We'd been arguing, he'd not been talking to me, and I went and played, and he showed up to the game, and my mother had said, leave his tickets, and I was like, he's not going to come, he hasn't spoken to him for 2 weeks. But he ended up coming to the game, and I played particularly well, but he didn't. He said, you should have done this, you should have done that. He didn't even look at me. But I found the match program, England versus Scotland. We played at Hampden Park. And in it, he's given everybody scores, 6 out of 10, 5 out of 10. It comes down to me, and lo and behold, he's given me a 9 out of 10. But he never said to me, you were a 9 out of 10. You played really well in this game. He said to me, you should have done this. You should have done that. You were rubbish at this, rubbish at that. So it was just an example of his generation and his type of influence. He felt that he could have more impact on me and my personality if it was tough love, or if it was, don't give him any praise, make him earn praise. And that's basically, as a kid growing up in a really tough city like Liverpool, where we didn't grow up in a great neighborhood, we grew up in a tough neighborhood. He was a major influence. He was absolutely to blame for it all.
So you've coached at multiple levels, professional all the way down to the youth. Which has been your favorite age group coach?
Wow, that's a very tough question. And I don't really have an answer that is definitive. I love coaching. I love the relationship with players. I love the relationship with teams. I love the job and the prospect of getting teams to play with your vision or under your guise. And when that works out, those teams are always the most rewarding. And there's been so many different teams, different boys, girls. This women's professional team right now is particularly pleasing. I love this group. They're a really good group to be around because they got such talented and players who want to be better, want to get the message and deliver it on the field. So I couldn't say the under 13 boys was a great team. Under 15, my DC United under 23 teams a couple of years ago was a particularly enjoyable team because I think 10 or 11 of those boys went off and played professionally at a really good level. Some of them are still playing their trade in the MLS right now. Training with that group was very, very rewarding, very enjoyable because you knew they were on the cusp of going and doing great things. But, there's so many teams I could recount and say, oh, that was a good group, that was a good group. But the enjoyment is being connected to the players, getting the best out of the players, and managing a group of individuals to come together as a very effective collective. That's the most important thing for me.
Cool. So with these coaching of all these different levels, now what's the main differences between, let's start with men versus women?
Where do you begin with that one? I will say, for fear of criticism, that female players are a lot more cerebral than the men. The men will go to war with a good leader because he's a good leader. They don't want to know the battle plan. They just know that we're going to war. He's our leader. He's telling us to do this. We're going to go and do it. And they have that buy-in because that's their nature. The women will not go to war with a leader unless they want to know the battle plan. How are you going to make us win? How are you going to make sure that we come back from this battle and we've been successful? How are you going to ensure to us that we are going to be effective in this area and that area and this area? What it does, it makes you more thoughtful. They will say, you told us on Tuesday at 6:00 on the 21st of December, this is what you told us. They remember everything, forget nothing. The guys are a little bit more inclined because it's base emotion for them. Let's just go and play. The women want clarification. They want you to give them why we're doing it, the explanation of why we're doing things. And once that's in place, then they have the complete buy-in. And then they go and do the job and they go and win that war. And that's one of the biggest differences. Their personalities are completely different. If you shout at a group of boys, and your best friend is getting shouted at by the manager and he's lighting them up for doing something wrong, even though he's your best friend, you're like, whoop, let me distance myself from this one in case some of the bomb goes off near me. With the females, if you light up a female, they will get together and say, don't listen to him, he's an arsehole, take no notice to him. They all collectively get together. So when you go after one, you go after them all. And you have to be very, very cautious about the characters who can take a little bit of which buttons to push on the right personalities. Because if you don't do that right and you don't do it properly, you lose the entire dressing room.
Now, what about boys and girls? I mean, women are fully formed, cerebral cortexes. I know you've coached young boys. I don't know if I know you had some run-ins with my daughter at practice and harassing you and such, but dealing with, the pubescent boys and girls, the hormones, that kind of thing. What was the difference with dealing with those age groups? And then you have to deal with the parents as well. What was that like?
Well, the parents is a completely different conversation altogether. But the kids themselves.
That's a loaded question.
It's a difficult question to answer as well in the short time that we've got. But youth players, number one, if you start on a place with youth players that is of respect, I made it a priority for me to always shake hands with every player when I came to training. Always shake hands, always look them in the eye, make sure when they shook hands with you, it wasn't like a codfish. It was a handshake that was of value. And you look in the eye and you show to them that you actually care about them. Because in coaching youth players, in the youth game, their progress and development is the most important thing, right? The version of themselves that you are connecting to at that stage in their career is not the final version. So what you have to remember and remind yourself of constantly, you are contributing to what will eventually be the final version of this player. And if you contribute rubbish or you contribute bad stuff, then you're not helping this player form into the best version of themselves. So if you start from that position of respect, and then you can demand. With some of the boys players in particular, I've been, a reputation of being demanding with them. And the demand comes from recognizing that they have the capacity to reach a certain level. Poor coaching is demanding of somebody who doesn't have the ability to get where you want them to go. Expectation levels have to be measured. And, I've roasted and pushed and cajoled some young boys to get places where I think that they can go and be very successful. And I pride myself on not getting it wrong often, but you always get something, and nobody gets it right all the time. On the boys' side, I think there's been way, way, way more successes than failures. And the boys know that I'm going to be demanding of them. The females, for me, I was more successful when you sort of befriend them, when you're not so much of an authority figure, so much of a screamer and a shouter and moaning at them. If you befriend them and get in their corner, and they recognize that you are there solely for their benefit, the reward with the female players is much greater than it is with the boys. Much greater, because it comes from a really good place.
So how do we fix the boys system so the U.S. youth national team and moving forward to get to qualified, for the Olympics? So women were there, but the men's team, we keep falling short. What's the matter in youth soccer? What needs to be improved on the boys' side, but also on the women's side? What do you think needs to be improved?
Look, there are some really, really good coaches in this country. Some very good coaches. There's a dearth of talent across all of this country. The biggest issue is how to get a scouting system or a player identification system that allows coaches to bring in the best players, because everybody has an opinion. So starting at the U.S. national team level is, for Vlatko Andonovski on the women's side in particular, in his vision, he wants to play a certain way. There will be many opinions about who can play the best for the U.S. national team. But you have to remember, at that, the head of the serpent, that has to be the level that he wants to play at, the style in which he wants to play. And if it filters down from that style of play, that we're no longer identifying players to play that style, then we have a problem. We have a mishmash underneath. All these different representative youth teams don't play the same way as the first team plays. Systemically, organizationally, type of player, that's a problem. So you look at Spain, you look at Germany, you look at England, you look at Portugal. All of these teams have a national identity. Right now, on the women's side in the US, their national identity is extremely athletic, extremely competitive. They will steamroll over teams because they are just powerful, strong, athletic, competitive. They wear people down. But there are some teams in Europe that are catching up tactically and catching up with their ability to play certain styles. The Spanish style in particular is very good right now. The Germans have always been very, very good. So once in the female game, these other international countries match the US with their competitiveness and athleticism and their drive to, don't forget, US women have had a 10-year start, 15-year start in some of these other countries, thanks to Title IX. So they're well ahead of the game, but they're catching up. So Vlatko, who's a great coach, a really good cerebral mind, he's a very smart guy. I think he is overseeing a change in the women's game, because there's a lot of players who've been extremely successful for the US about to age out. And there's an incredibly talented group of young players coming underneath them that will make the next wave of US national team players on the women's side. And he has to make sure that his identity, the team identity, is first and foremost what he wants to do, and they get the players to play there. Then, the entire organization has to decide, is this right now the national identity of US teams? Because there really isn't one. And Greg Berhalter is also a fantastic coach, and also a guy who's very well-rounded in the game and played overseas. He has the same problem. Because when you get players from Michigan who are a little bit different from the players in Florida, who are vastly different from the players in California, who are incredibly different from the players in Texas, this country's so bloody big, it's huge, and it's got pockets of talent and pockets of ability all over the country. Boston, New York, there's loads of them that are really, really good players in these areas. Identifying, in reality, the US would be better if they had 4 national teams, North, South, East, West, and they'd probably have 4 different brands of football coming out of each of those regions. So I really feel sympathetic towards people at the US soccer organizational level to try and come up with a one-size-fits-all. But it takes a really powerful leader in a head coaching position to say, this is our identity. This is the way we're going to play. Every team that represents the US, this is how we're going to play. And we're going to develop players at a young age to come and play in our national team and do the same job as their predecessors who've gone years and years before them. That is the biggest hurdle the US has to overcome.
One of the other hurdles that seem to be an issue in the women's game particularly is the visibility of the women, the NWSL, as well as the pay gap. What's your opinion on that, being that the national team success is, far greater, and when they play, they sell out stadiums. You've got quite a few national team players on your team. I'm sure they have, opinions on this.
They do, and I've been on record saying it, and I'll go on record saying it again. These world-class players are underpaid. In comparison to their male counterparts, they are grossly underpaid. They are grossly underexposed. Our league, in terms of broadcast rights, in terms of exposure around the globe, is not the same level as the men. So therefore, selling sponsorship, selling advertisements, selling all the pieces that come in that broadcast package now doesn't bring as much revenue into the game through that avenue as it should. Sponsorships, again, male sponsorship dollars in sponsorship dollars in the US, 96% of that sponsorship goes to males, 4% goes to women. That's incredibly poor form. So I've got a team chock filled with world-class players. So does Mark Parsons, so does Paul Riley, so does Freya Coombs, so does James Clark, so does every coach in this NWSL league. You've got players in their team who are fantastic world-class players. They do not get anywhere near the amount of money that they should. And it saddens me when I was a coach of a professional team in the UK, my annual budget was greater than the monthly budget. So my monthly budget was greater than the annual budget that we have here for players. That's a poor indictment of where we are with these players. But having said that, the talent level comparatively is great in the NWSL. I just think that it needs to get better exposure, better sponsorship, better advertisement, better promotion. And once, that happens, the tide comes in, the whole boat rises. We will all get better. The arrival of Angel City into this league and that ownership, that powerful ownership group has really set the cat amongst the pigeons. And everybody's now, we've just done it with Ovechkin, as you mentioned. And we've done it with Dominique Dawes, another, world-class athlete, gymnast, Olympian. Getting people like that into the female game to promote and help and get recognition for the female game is key. Angel City doing that, on the West Coast has really shifted the paradigm in this league a little bit, which I think is very, very good. And I'm hoping that, with league growth the next couple of seasons, there's a crop of young female players aspiring to play in college or aspiring, to get into professional football, that this league will provide a better home for. And not only a better home for in terms of playing, but also a better lifestyle through revenue and income and contracts and everything else, all the accoutrements that comes from being a professional footballer.
Now I got a scenario for you. My niece plays for the national hockey team for Team Canada, and they're having a lot of trouble. I was kind of like, hey, Ovechkin's getting involved in soccer. Why isn't he getting involved in the women's hockey game? The women, U.S. and Canada put on, a show whenever they play. There's also the same pay gap, the loss of visibility. But one of the things that has come up with COVID is they've had the NHL season. They've had all the junior nationals and all these other stuff. The Women's World Championships was postponed and maybe even canceled. They would never think to do that with the men's game. Imagine, and there's a potential of, what are we going to do with the Olympics? What do you think, what kind of impact is that going to have on the women's game? Because typically, after the World Cup or the Olympics, we ride this big, exposure to the women's game. So if the Olympics cancel, just like they potentially cancel the women's hockey game, what's your opinion on what's going to happen to the league is without that extra exposure?
Yeah, you're right, Andrew. Every World Cup, every Olympics, there's a huge surge in attention and promotion of the women's game. Do I think that it will have a significant impact? I think, the COVID pandemic has changed everybody's mindset. It's been a huge shift. So I think explaining away anomalies like a no Olympics or a no hockey game, I think it's been easy to do because of the pandemic. But I think if this league is to, and women's sports in particular, is to sustain a growth level, then those type of things are important. We've got two players from Japan on our team. One of them just recently attended a national team camp, and they've been told that, the Olympics will happen. It will just be without foreign spectators. It will only be domestic crowds, which is encouraging to hear. It's how it's exposed through visual media and social media, and how those platforms can promote the game. That's really important because, gate attendance in the venue itself is, it's a bucket list event, life event for people who go to the Olympics. But I think this one has to be, just struck off as it's not going to happen. It's relative to this pandemic. It's really changed all of our lives in the last 18 months. So, I still believe in the game. I still believe in the growth. I still believe in the sustainability of professional sports for women and sports in general for women. I think it makes incredibly rounded. I spend a lot of time with these female professional athletes, and I'm amazed. They're fantastic. The type of people that they have become through what they've endured, how they've managed to get to this level in their lives and be incredibly talented, incredibly articulate, incredibly rounded. It amazes me, and I'm humbled by it. And I think that is something that most parents, if they could have their children aspire to, not just football, but hockey or field hockey or basketball, whatever level that these players get to in sports, whatever sport they play, and manage to get there through all of the difficulties and challenges that they've endured, they become much more rounded, much more complete people. And our team is a testimony to it. They're fantastic, absolutely brilliant.
So when we're talking about youth development and what's making a greater athlete, in Europe, they often talk about they like having multi-sport athletes that wind up being their better or top-end players, on the male side. I don't know about the female side. But here, and you've probably experienced this in Loudoun County, specialization happens so early. What kind of impact do you think that has on the game, with the kids having to keep up with the Joneses and specialize in playing soccer at 9-10 years old?
That's a debate that's been raging for quite some time. Personally, and my personal feeling on it is, there are so many crossover benefits for multiple sport athletes. For instance, I'm probably the worst basketball player on the planet, but even I recognize that defensive movement when you're low and you move laterally for defenders is fantastic. That is a huge benefit. Hand-eye coordination, just general ball coordination in most of these sports is fantastic. I grew up in a country where cricket and rugby and soccer were the only things. Tennis, and every time Wimbledon would come around, everybody out on the street playing tennis. That's just what happened. But, here in America, this is a land of opportunity in more ways than one. You can play any of these sports anytime, anywhere, any place. There's fantastic facilities here. There's fantastic opportunities here. And there's a reason that Americans win most Olympic gold medals across all sports, all disciplines. It's because they are very, very good athletes. And I would recommend that any young player, diversifies in their athletic competition through to middle school. After middle school, when their bodies are still going through that formation stage, where they're now becoming closer to the athlete that they're going to become, getting coordination, getting competition. A player who plays soccer exclusively at a really top team and is always vying to win and challenge and get results, they don't understand the benefit of playing on a team that gets smashed 8-0, but you still play as well as you can. So that mental piece is so important to kids as well. Learning how to lose graciously, but losing with your best effort. So there's always a benefit to multiple environments in sports. Sports themselves, are ideal. I say to our players all the time, you cheat in sports, you cheat in life. You win in sports, you win in life. You manage yourself through sports, you can manage yourself through life. All of these things have mutual benefit, but I don't see, in younger players in particular, why committing to one sport financially, time-wise, athletically, and the limitations that it provides is of benefit, because you really don't become the best player that you're ever going to be until later. I say to people all the time, I was a professional footballer, and I don't remember one match I played in before I was 13 years of age. I remember one time we lost in a final, and I was really upset because it was a major event, but I couldn't tell you any of the scores, any of the games, any of the coaches. I couldn't tell you that because I was young and I was still growing. But when after 13 and 14, you get onto more select teams, then I think it's important that you specialize. And, at that stage, I was still trying to be a boxer as well as a footballer. But you can't do both. You realize that, I'm going to become a jack of all trades, master of none, if I stay across all these disciplines. Eventually, you have to specialize if you're going to become an elite player in one sport. But doing it too young, I think it's a mistake.
I've seen a lot here on the youth side, a lot because of COVID, and my daughter is one of the victims, increased number of injuries due to lack of resources. Do you think that's going to be an issue with your team this year with the lack of resources? It's one thing to be training in a gym in front of a trainer. It's another thing to be training in your home gym with the trainer looking on or on a workout that's been given to you.
Yeah, the pandemic has really, again, shifted so many things for people. My strength and conditioning coach, or my high performance director, is fantastic, and he does a great job with the players. And we've got all the bells and whistles, all the pieces that we need to make sure our professional athletes are managing their health and wellness and preparing to play matches as the best physical and mental versions of themselves as they possibly can. We have a sports psychologist who helps our players manage some of the challenges of professional sports as well. Younger players don't have that. Younger players, again, think that, there's some of the mistakes that people make, the Tiger Woods 10,000 hours, has committed some people to some heinous training exercise programs and things that are wrong messages for kids. The enjoyment of the sport, the enjoyment of working out, the pleasure you take out of it is most important, because that's when you get the most benefit. It's like a kid in school. Kid in school hates math, hates the math teacher, hates math, hates going in. You think they're going to be good at math? Absolutely not. It's going to be something that they fail in. So the enjoyment component and the mental commitment to getting better at whatever piece it is key. And it's hard for these kids to replicate any of that on their own. It's not easy. They're not cut out to do that. They're not developed enough mentally yet to be able to understand the benefits of training in a sport environment with a leader and people who are at different levels, different stages, where you can gauge and measure yourself and challenge yourself. I want to be better than her at this. That's incredibly beneficial for these young players who are still forming at a stage of their athletic development.
I think there's still lacking especially in the women's side. Even, I'm going to call out my daughter's club, your former club, St. James FCV. We're out here in Loudon. These girls are not getting any strength and conditioning. Part of it was before, they were limited time and space, but I think a lot of these injuries can be avoided if we dedicate more time to ACL prevention, especially in females. Females have a higher propensity for tearing their ACLs. They're predisposed due to. We interviewed Dr. West, who I think is on the team staff for the Spirit. And then also just in the DNA makeup that we have to train a girl how to properly jump and land, and women tend to play higher than the men do. What is it, what do we have to do to get them at the youth level, at this high level, 13, 14 to 18, the coaches say, hey, to lose 20 minutes of practice 2 times a week to get some strength and conditioning in is going to benefit us in the long run. What do we have to say? What do we have to do? Because that's what you guys do. You said today you had practice and then a lift.
So we have a process, and again, I have to give kudos to my high performance coach. I hope he's not listening to this, because I constantly give him a hard time and I don't want to give him too much praise. But he's great. We do a rehabilitation. It's okay rehab and after you've done an ACL. And everybody's aware of the studies about the female pelvic platform and how, the propensity of ACLs happen, and again, it's inordinately larger on the synthetic surfaces, which I'm not a big fan of. But a lot of these youth players play on these synthetic surfaces where, any stud getting caught on the ground, it's like, see you later. So our issue is prehabilitation. Let's try and work players in preventing some of these situations and getting them ready before we even start training. So we have a half an hour process by which our players will roll out. They will do certain stretches. They'll do resistant bands. They'll do all the necessary pieces before they actually get going. So they activate themselves. And if professionals are doing that and youth players want to replicate or facsimile what pros do, that should be part of the processes. If coaches now, whether it's a dynamic warm-up or incorporating part of their dynamic warm-up to a rehabilitation exercise process, in females in particular, I think it's really important. It used to be some of these youth coaches never even did a dynamic warm-up, never got their bodies ready, never did any coordinated movements or active stretching exercises. Kids would just go play right away. And, I think that now the science has shown that if you activate people and you do a little bit of rehabilitation, you can't do everything to prevent. And we had 2 ACL injuries this year. One of them was, in fact, both of them were non-contact injuries. One of them on synthetic surface in January, another one at Audi Field playing in a game, just non-contact. And, I think that was a product of a 10, 11 week preseason that we were enduring. So you can track those type of incidents. But I think in general for the youth teams, rehabilitation or something prior to a dynamic active movement exercise is important.
So let's talk about your team. What's the prospects this year? We're going to make the playoffs. We got some new additions. How much time you got left?
Sure, they're in the gym lifting right now. I've got to go in and see them before they get out of here. So
don't you got a meeting to get to too?
Yeah, I got another meeting after this one. But look, like I say, I love this team. Yeah, adding Kelly O'Hara, adding Emily Sonnet, bringing a Japanese player, Takarada, bringing Julia Rodder from Sweden. We've now taken another step forward. And when I took the job in 2019, the process for me was to build in a 36-month program to try and get, strategic growth in the team, the type of player, the type of depth. Training today was incredibly active, very competitive. And you could be forgiven if you're watching the training session and not knowing which is the first group, which is the second group. It's that competitive, which was the whole idea behind it. So, yeah, I was disappointed with the entire process of preseason because I think it's unforgivable to force professional athletes to play in uber competitive matches in the Challenge Cup when it's a preseason. The preseason is to prepare for the season. It's not to be competitive right out the bat. So we're playing in competitive matches with players who only have a 45 or 60-minute loading under their belt, and asking them to play at that, uber competitive level during that period is not really giving them the best platform to succeed. So it was a mixed bag for me. I thought there was some great things achieved, but overall, I'm in a way happy we didn't get to the Challenge Cup final, because it would have meant an extra week of training, an extra week of match play, which wouldn't have allowed me to get the players ready for next week when we go to Orlando. So I'm hoping that, that time that we gave them 5 days off to sort of separate the two seasons out. So they've been back in and they've been buzzing since they came back in. And I'm hoping that we get off to a good start in Orlando, and then we go to Louisville and play that game as well. So it's two tough games right out the bat.
Now, how do you deal with the national team call-ups? You have a couple key players you're going to lose.
We potentially lose 7 or 8. So we've tried to shape our squad to accommodate some of these losses that might occur during the Olympic window. I think it was crazy of the league to schedule games during the last FIFA break. We played 2 matches during the last FIFA break, which was madness. We have to play without our national team players in preseason. But I think, as the league starts to evolve, we'll try and schedule matches around events like this. We play in this window from April through to November. The Olympics is right in the middle of that window. It's very difficult for us to do it. Most other countries don't have to do that. Most other leagues play outside of this period. But we've tried to accommodate some of the losses that we will have with younger players and having a closer spectrum of ability in the squad, not so broad and not so big. So when we do experience some losses, which is going to happen, the loss is not so massive. And that's what we're going to try and hope for.
All right, a couple more questions. What is a dumpling?
A dumpling is a kind way of saying you've just made a mistake and you're not doing a lot of smart things. So it could be phrased a lot of different ways. But look, my players call me a dumpling all the time. Whenever I say something or trip myself up, they're like, "You're a dumpling." So it's a fun critique. Let's say that.
So they say you're probably the loudest coach on the sidelines. I thought players play, coaches coach. This is their canvas. Let them go play. How come? Why don't you just sit back and relax and enjoy the show?
Because I like to. Most of my noise happens post-incident, which I think is a plan. When I am loud, it's a great job, Andrew. Well done, Andrew. What a great ball, Andrew. Fantastic. Those type of things, I think, reinforce to the players that you have a supporter on the sideline who is in your corner and recognizing when you've done well. It then gives you the template to say, hey, that's not working for me. You need to drop and do deeper and the other side of things. The games for young players are still about learning. They are learning situations. At a pro level here for us, we do most of our work before the game happens. But because they're closer to the finished product. Young players are not the finished product, and our job is to try and help them again get closer to the version of themselves that's the absolute best. Whether it's going off to play in college are going to try and aspire to be a pro. But I'm also very, very emotionally connected to my team, so it's hard to sit down and just watch.
Yeah, I've been a Spirit fan for quite a while, and I loved when you came in, you kind of brought that, I'm assuming it's a Spanish style. It's the same style that my daughter is learning, you know, possession, passing, you know, the team approach. Was that hard to get the team that you inherited to buy into that?
No, not really. I think they were ready for a redirect as a team. You know, coming off a season that they didn't have many wins and they were not particularly successful. Whenever you get that in a professional environment, players are ready for a redirect, ready to find a way to change their fortune. So we also revamped the squad. There was a massive turnover of players. We were very strategic in who we brought in and the type of positions we wanted to bring players into. So getting the players in the right spots to play our way was our initial plan. And once we had that, then it sort of flowed forward from there. So it wasn't as difficult as I'd like to make out. But I think it comes down to the players, the type of players you bring in as well. And the players that we kept here had complete buy-in. They were totally bought in because they wanted to be better.
Who's going to make the biggest impact this year of the rookie class? You have a very big rookie class here. You got Rodman.
Yep.
She's going to make she was a first-round draft pick, right?
She was number 2. She was 2, and Tara McKeown was number 8. Those two are very, very good. 2 forwards, young forwards. Trin's been great, but she's 18 years of age. You have to manage her carefully. No, I've been really pleased with everybody that's come to the football club. The rookies that we bring in, they need to you know, bring on the knowledge of being a pro. They have to, you know, adapt to the professional game. And I think it takes a little bit of time. Some take to it quicker than others, but we're going through that typical process right now. But there are other players that have come to the club that are not rookies that, you know, are experienced in the game. I think they'll be impactful this year. I think they'll be huge for us.
Does a player like Kelly O'Hara reach out and help coach up some of these, you know, like Trin?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, Kel has been great with Trin. Kel's great with everybody, but she's been particularly been great with Trin. And she's great to have around the dressing room, great to have around the training ground. She will, you know, she wants clarification. She's one of those typical players who is not going to do anything unless she understands exactly what you're asking me to do. And she's great about it. And I think she's an ideal example for a lot of these younger pros to see how well she's enjoyed in the game, how long she stayed at that top level, because everything about her is professional. She's just a consummate pro. That's somebody coming to say, I'll be right with that. I got to go and see them before they head out to be.
No, I want to thank you. I can't wait to get out to see a game. I know Eden was disappointed that we didn't get you in studio. She wanted to, you know, say hi.
Give me a hard time?
Yeah, give you a hard time. I think it was both ways. She said you used to take her headband, you know.
Yeah, that's only because she would like kick a ball at me or have a little laugh at the jokes. Look, I enjoyed seeing her every single time she was on the training ground because I like a little bit of spirit, a little bit of sass like that about players, and she was always all about that. So yeah, it was definitely back and forth. So please give her a big hug from me and tell her I was asking after her. I'm here at Audi Stadium right now. We got finished late today. We're in the gym right now. So these are long days getting ready for season come along. So I apologize for not being able to make it out.
No, I appreciate the time. I know you're busy. Good luck in Orlando. Let's go take them down and get off.
I hope so. We'll see.
All right. Thank you, Coach.
Thanks, Andrew. Take care, mate. See you.
Yeah. Bye.